Yes.
What's the best way to talk to our evangelical sisters and brothers who are extremely conservative on the fiscal side to open them up a little bit to some of the stuff we're talking about?
I think you should talk to them, use scripture. I think you should confront them, be polite. I think you should do everything you can to show them what you're about. If you could possibly bring them and show them, if you could possibly take them overseas and see the kind of work that you do, or even see domestically some of the problems that we have in our own country. One of the things that I've seen over the years that works is that when you take a congressman or senator to see something, you will change their mind immediately. I have taken a number of congressmen overseas that were very much against the programs that I was pushing, and their minds have been changed. And that's the best way. The second best way is to go and see them and talk to them and talk about, if they're evangelicals, I'd talk about, you know, what God says about it, and I would talk about that they need to speak out. That, you know, they need to speak out for the least of these. And you need to appeal to that. And they're going to say, well, the church should take care of this. And then you'll say, fine, that's great. Okay, let's let the church take care of that. But the church is going to have to make up one heck of a lot of money. Because as you know, let's just take domestic hunger programs in the United States. You know what the government spends on domestic hunger and what the churches and individuals spend on domestic hunger, what percentage that is in America? Take a guess. 93% of the hunger programs in America are funded by the U.S. government. 7% is funded by the churches and individuals. So, if the congressmen and senators are going to say, okay, then, you know, we're going to have to make up $300 billion, they're not going to be able to do that. And you can also use the same argument overseas. What we're talking about overseas is 0.5% to do some of the best work in the world. What we do overseas really, really works. It keeps people alive, whether it's feeding or whether it's immunization or water or microcredit. It works. It's the best. And so you appeal to them in that way. But if you can take them and show them, that's the best. That always works. It'll change their heart. And if you can't change their heart by that, then they shouldn't be in Congress. They need to be voted out.
Yeah, I was wondering in your own mind, because government programs can kind of grow and grow and grow, and old programs can just stay and self-perpetuate. Kind of the programs where you're truly helping the poorest of the poor versus a program where you can start enabling people to start not taking personal responsibility. That's a tricky line, but every congressman will somehow have to say, this is how I decide where this is starting to cause more problems and it's helping. How do you, maybe that's great.
Yeah, that's a good question. And I think, you know, I would talk about those kind of programs that you know that work, like basic education of mothers. You know, when we teach mothers how to read and write, and when you do that, the population of the country goes down, the gross national product goes up, because they have less children, they get smarter, they learn about breastfeeding and boiling water and nutrition. They learn about borrowing a little bit of money and paying it back in microcredit. And you talk about those kinds of projects. You can't go wrong. And everybody understands disaster relief. They understand, you know, the kind of thing that's going on today in Kenya and Somalia, that we've got to have it. What sometimes they see is sometimes a disaster that goes bad, or something when, you know, sometimes the American government in the past has come in and has hurt the farmers locally, you know, by maybe bringing their own food in, and has disrupted the farming situation and brought food into a situation that they shouldn't have. We should have bought locally. Or we've had a stuffability problem like we did a couple times in El Salvador and Egypt, where we had to pay off what we felt was a debt. So we stuffed food into El Salvador and into Egypt, and the food ended up going to cattle, and it became a big scandal. And a lot of those things became national scandals and got in the paper, and there was a lot of bad publicity, and a lot of politicians have held on to those kinds of things and used those as examples. But we have great examples of how our food aid and our programs really work and keep people alive. And I would just constantly go back to those and show them, and try to get them to go see it. If you can't get them to go overseas, show them something local. Get them to, and go back and see them. Don't write them. I mean, the worst thing, the best thing, if you have to do something, write them. If you can't see them, but go see them. Eyeball them. See them every year. And put them on the spot. You know more than they do about this issue. Educate them. They need to be educated. They don't know about this issue. Congress now has 20,000 issues before them. 20,000 issues. And you know, and I know, and they know, but they don't know these issues. They know maybe 400 of these issues. But their constituents expect them to know that. They are so busy. If you don't bring this issue to their mind, they're overwhelmed with people getting their attention. And the voiceless, the people that we represent, they're not getting in to see these people. You have to get in to see them. You have to get their attention. If you get their attention and they listen, you'll change them. I guarantee you.
Tony, the recent conference between the House and Senate on the FY12 budget, can you give us your perspective on how well you think poverty-related foreign assistance fared and what was agreed upon?
I don't know yet. I don't know what happened recently. I haven't had track of it in the last week. But I do know that we have some friends in the Senate. And in the House of Representatives, we didn't do well. But in the Senate, I made about 6 phone calls last week, and 6 of the senators that I spoke to, all Republicans, said they were going to do the best they could to hold the line on the Senate number, which was much higher than the House number. And so whether that's going to hold in conference committee, I don't know. These senators are under tremendous pressure. And this is a time when people like you can come alongside, and a word from you, if you are a constituent of them, could really help. Because they're not hearing. I mean, they're hearing from me, but they're not hearing from you. They need to hear from you. I don't know what's happened in the last few days.
I know we all see a lot of different causalities of hunger and poverty around the world, lots of different issues that feed into that. An issue I'm particularly been involved in is HIV and AIDS. I wonder if you could speak to the interconnectedness of the HIV/AIDS crisis, and also where the current funding situation impacts that hunger.
HIV/AIDS and hunger, HIV/AIDS and food.
Right, yeah. How
I didn't quite get the question.
HIV/AIDS, the lack of funding is impacting world poverty.
Well, it's kind of all bunched in there together with the international money. And what kind of worries us is that these are what we call discretionary programs. And discretionary programs are not protected. Where some of the mandatory programs like food stamps or the SNAP programs, some of those have been protected and probably will be protected, especially some of the domestic hunger programs. But the discretionary programs, some of the programs that most of us are concerned about, especially some of the people in this room, like HIV/AIDS, disaster relief, food security kind of issues, they are really coming under scrutiny. And it's hard to say what's going to happen to them now. If the Senate doesn't get their way, there'll probably be a 17 to 20% cut over last year's numbers, 2011. And that'll be because last year's cut was fairly substantial. So, now we also have the problem with the super committee. And if the super committee doesn't, pass, if they don't pass what they're supposed to pass before Christmas, and they also have a timetable coming up right before Thanksgiving, if they don't pass what they're supposed to pass, then these discretionary programs will all be cut. And they're also put into the pot with defense items. So programs like disaster relief, food aid, I believe are going to be treated like defense items. We're all be put into the same pot. And that is not going to be fair. So these are very tough times. And if there was ever a time that we need to be really on top of this and be a voice for the voiceless, it's now. These decisions are being made, and they're being made in committees. They're not public yet, but they're going to be made in the next few weeks. Yes?
You talked about the different steps that you take to feed the world like very quickly, specifically for the U.S., like informing and involving African prayer. So I'm just curious what you have for that international world. I mean, I come from Uganda, but I'm just curious what you're planning to do to involve all these different governments.
I didn't hear the last part of your question. What are we planning to do for Africa?
Right, or the developing nations, or
The question is, this young lady's from Uganda, and she wants to know what's being planned for Africa as a result of this explosion of population that is occurring, certainly by the year 2050, what's going to happen. Because Africa is not producing any more food today than they were 30 years ago. And that's an amazing statistic. What do you think about it? There's a lot of things that are going on that are good right now from the standpoint of planning. It all started in the year 2007, 2008. It started through the World Bank, through Chicago Council on Global Affairs, through a lot of NGOs. When President Obama came in, he came in with a new program called Feed the Future. And it was to change a lot of things relative to changing moving over to agriculture, since 70 to 80% of the people in Africa are connected with agriculture, that we need to invest more in agriculture in Africa and other countries. And Feed the Future is about that. And Feed the Future is not funded in any large degree now. It was to be funded starting in 2008, 2009. It's funded a little bit. But I think if you look at the World Bank and the G20 and everything that they have been promoting, I think the direction is that it's all moving towards agriculture. It's all moving towards newer technologies, better seeds, better fertilizers, better technology. And I think just with a little bit of help, Africa can turn itself around, because Africa is fertile. Africa just needs a little bit of help. And Africa has the ability to turn itself around. Has it been helped in the last few years? Not really. Not in any great degree, because the money has not been there. The countries are going to have to turn themselves around. The World Bank is going to have to put more money into it, so is the United States and other Western nations.
Recognizing that agriculture is important internationally, as well as the huge agricultural lobby here in the States, and also recognizing the fact that some of the policies of the U.S. government and how they use things like corn to produce ethanol, and how inefficient that is, and yet it's subsidized by the U.S. government, recognizing that that increases prices, and that the statistics I've gathered is that the state of Iowa produces more corn than the entire continent of Africa, and yet increasing that price of corn because of the using of corn for energy in the United States is highly inflationary to corn prices internationally. Do you see a change in the U.S. government in its agricultural policy towards subsidizing things like ethanol production from corn?
I sure hope so. I mean, I hope that our whole stance on subsidizing and all of that changes. I mean, they're talking about that in our farm bill. Even in the super committee, they're talking about making changes even before we get to the farm bill. I would hope that we would make changes. As you know, when we get to the farm bill, the farming lobby is very strong, very powerful. They always have been. But there is a lot of talk among some of the farming legislators that they are ready to make a deal. They are ready to do away with some of the subsidies. So we'll have to wait and see. I hope so. And the other thing we need to do, we need to buy local. You know, do away with these subsidies, do away with the tremendous benefit that we give these ethanol growers. We need to buy our food local as much as we can when we go overseas. And we need to do a lot of things. Are we going to do it? I can't answer that. I don't know. Congress seems ready to make those kind of changes. There's big money there that we can save if we can do it. Do they have the guts to do it? We'll have to see.
Tony, could you share beyond the critical role the U.S. government plays, where have you seen helpful models in the corporate world, even individuals, organizations that are engaging in advocacy, engaging in tackling hunger, independence of where the U.S. government is?
Yeah, I'm the executive director of the Alliance to End Hunger, and we have a lot of corporations that belong to the Alliance that are pretty amazing in some of the things that they do. Cargill, Elanco, Sodexo, Mosaic. I mean, they do a lot of things to work on hunger, and a lot of the companies have really developed a social conscience anymore. And it is amazing. And I hope that in your advocacy, breakouts that you're going to have, that you talk a lot about that. We need to really speak to our corporation and our businesses about really being involved, because so many of our companies are very, very involved. ConAgra, Walmart, they've been amazing in some of the things that they have sponsored and produced and are working on and have supported. Yeah. Okay.
Any other questions? Very good. Yes? Last chance. Going once, going twice.